And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into a live edition of Locked On SEC. We got a lot to discuss as Georgia goes down. They lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. We got plenty to react to. Let's jump into it here on Locked On SEC.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. And, man, what a game it was. An exciting SEC championship game. Give us a second. Your camera's getting out of focus. Trying to make sure we have a good video here. But regardless, Georgia, the win streak ends. My goodness. What a game it was. We're going to get all into the recapping it. And, of course, what are the repercussions? Who's going to make the college football playoff now? I mean, there were just so many questions we got to get into, but let's just dive right into it. By the way, this episode of Locked On SEC is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Go post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, bear with me. There we go. Just trying to get our video focus. I don't know what's going on here, but anyway, let's dive into it. As Alabama, your SEC champions, and it was it's their 7th SEC title in the last 10 seasons. I believe the stat was they have now won 9 straight SEC championship games that they've played in. And how this one started, man, Georgia came out with full momentum. I mean, Alabama gets the ball first. They go 3 and out. Georgia gets the ball. They go on an 8-play, 83-yard touchdown drive, capped by a Kendall Milton 17-yard touchdown run. And then Bama gets the ball back and goes 3 and out again. I mean, you were looking at this one going, my goodness. I mean, Georgia's going to run away with this one. I mean, I saw some people kind of tweeting that idea out, like, yeah, Georgia's just going to dominate this game. And then suddenly momentum shifted. Georgia gets the ball. They go 3 and out, right? Because it was 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2. They punt. And then Bama gets the field goal. Then Georgia goes 3 and out again, and Bama scores a touchdown. Suddenly it's 10-7 Bama. And it felt like so much of this game, like Georgia couldn't do anything with the football. I mean, it really was insane, like how much Bama's defense was suffocating and dominating. Georgia misses the field goal there, and then that weird drive right before the half where Bama goes down, and on the 4th and 4 from the Georgia 37, it looked like they were just going to try to get Georgia to jump. They call a timeout, and then they still go for it because it's like you're too close to punt, too long for a field goal, and they go for it. And Jalen Milroe finds Isaiah Bond for a 22-yard gain down to the Georgia 15. And when you watch the replay, it looked like that ball kind of came out and touched the ground. And they didn't review it. I mean, Bama did a good job of running up to the line, and they ran another play, and Georgia couldn't even think about, or anybody could really think about, hey, maybe we should take a look at this. And sure enough, with 48 seconds left, Jalen Milroe connects with Jermaine Burton for a 15-yard touchdown, and it makes it 17-7. I mean, if Georgia gets a stop there and it's 13-7, you feel good if you're Georgia. But my God, I mean, going into the locker room down 10, a little demoralized. You're big bad Georgia. You're the team that's had this long win streak going. And I can't say enough about Jalen Milroe today. I mean, he was the MVP of this game. And he's only 13 for 23 passing. Georgia did do a good job defensively, I thought, for the most part in the second half of getting after him, forcing some errant throws here and there. But when he needed to make plays, he did it. I mean, only 29 total rushing yards on 14 carries. Granted, sacks mixed in there. But, Milroe just made the big plays when Bama needed him most. And as the second half comes out, Georgia gets the ball right out of the half. They get a first down. And then that was it. And then they're punting again. And it was just like, man, are they going to get back into this? They get the field goal on the next drive. Then the unfortunate, the very next drive, Bama punts, and then Georgia fumbles. And Bama's already in scoring position. Georgia does a good job of getting a stop. They hold them to a field goal to make it 20-10. So Georgia's still alive. But then they punt. Bama goes 3 and out. They punt. And then that's when Georgia puts together the touchdown drive. Gets started with what? It was a nice punt return, right? Anthony Evans gets it, takes it 28 yards from midfield up to the Alabama 35. And then it's still, there was no methodicalness to Georgia's offense today. Like, it just was, everything was so hard. Everything was so difficult. It was like Bama made them earn everything offensively. But they finally, they punched it in for pay dirt. Carson Beck, 1-yard keeper. And it was, 20-17 at that point. You're like, all right, Georgia's back in this. 10 minutes to go. But then Bama, in my opinion, this was drive of the game. They put together a 9-yard, 75-yard touchdown drive, scoring with 4:29 left in the game to push it back to a 10-point lead. That was the play of the game, or the drive of the game. Roydell Williams punches it in, and then that's when, Georgia starts putting together a drive. They go down 10 plays, 75 yards, but my God, did Bama make them work. It was a 4th and 1 at the Georgia 34. Dejon Edwards rushes for 11 yards, gets the first down. They get all the way down to the 1, 1st and goal at the Alabama 6. Kendall Milton runs for 5 yards. Then 2nd and goal, Carson Beck run for no gain. 3rd and goal, Kendall Milton run for no gain. 4th and goal, timeout Georgia. They got to burn a timeout there. And then finally, Kendall Milton punches it in. But it was just insanity. Literally everything Georgia did offensively, Bama made them work super hard to get. And so, again, I just can't say enough about Alabama's defense today, what they were able to do. We'll get the defensive stats here in a little bit on who led them in tackles and all that, but the linebacker play it came up huge today for Alabama. Absolutely huge. And they just made Georgia work. Georgia was so used to some of these games just, they gash in the run game and they control the clock, game control, some people refer to it as just kind of churning away, first down, touchdown, boom. And the defense has been so good all year for Georgia, and really throughout this 2-year, 3-year run. But credit Nick Saban, man. There's a reason why he's the best coach in college football, and he had his guys up and ready to play today. And Bama was the better team. They just were. So Georgia, that long win streak comes to an end in Atlanta, as it's a place Nick Saban just continues to dominate. Dive a little bit deeper into the numbers. Total yardage, it's kind of a wash. Georgia 321, Bama 306. Time of possession, Georgia almost 29 minutes, Bama 31. First downs, Georgia had 19, Bama had 20. On third downs, Georgia was 4 for 12, Bama was 3 for 13. Georgia had the turnover. I think we said that coming into the game, on our preview on Friday, or talking about it with Chris Marler earlier in the week. I said, if Georgia's going to, or Bama's going to win this game, they've got to take care of the football and no mistakes from Jalen Milroe. And there were none. He was outstanding. And Georgia had the costly turnover that flipped the game in Bama's favor here. So congrats to the Alabama Crimson Tide. They do it yet again. And now the big question, we're going to touch on it after this break. If you guys want to jump in, leave your comments. We'll get to some of those here in just a second. But what the hell does the playoff committee do? Now, granted, this Florida State game against Louisville, ACC title game is about to kick off. We're going to find out who is, if Louisville can pull off the upset, that maybe makes the decision a little bit easier. Is Texas in? They absolutely dominated in the Big 12 title game earlier today. And, of course, the Bama-Texas game from earlier in the year that Bama lost at home, does that come into play? So we got plenty of tough stuff to discuss here. We'll get to all of it with you guys here in just a second right here on Locked On SEC. I want to remind you guys real quick, this episode presented to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Look, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you got to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have all the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. They're not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have all of the pool of quality candidates that LinkedIn Jobs offers you. So easy that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats these days, and they're going to make it a lot more, value your time and make it easy for you to use their resources to hire. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, guys, diving back into it here as we are reacting to Alabama beating Georgia in the SEC championship game, 27-24. I think I heard Alabama is now, 9 straight SEC championship games that they've played in. Absolute insanity. Jalen Milroe wins the MVP. We bid farewell to the SEC on CBS. So that happened, but Alabama, they are the champs, and they are taking home yet another trophy for that trophy case. And my God, like we talked about the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing with Kirby and Nick, but if you don't think Nick is in that dude's head, I know he finally got over the hump and beat him in the national championship a couple years ago. And granted, it took a couple of injuries to Bama wide receivers for it to happen, right? Jameson Williams and John Mechie. But it's just at what point do you look at it and say he has his number? As good as Georgia was, look, I thought Georgia was going to win this one, and I thought they were going to separate in the second half and win big. That was my prediction earlier in the week. But we saw, even in the first half of this game, when Bama's up 10.5, you didn't get the vibe at all that Georgia's going to come out and they're going to deliver a gut punch back to them in the second half. Like, it just didn't feel that way. Bama played with more intensity, it felt like, in this game. Like, as the game went along, it just felt like they wanted it more. Like, they were playing harder than Georgia was. And so now we turn our attention to the college football playoff. And what in the world is the committee going to do now? Because as we looked at the latest rankings that came out just a couple of days ago, we had Georgia number 1. They lose. Michigan getting ready to play Iowa right now. Washington, of course, they're undefeated. They took care of business Friday night against Oregon, and Florida State is about to play Louisville. So we know Washington's in, no doubt, right? Washington's a lock. They were the number 3 team. They got a victory. They're in. Both Michigan and Florida State, it feels like if one of those teams wins tonight, they are, or both of them, whatever, whoever wins out of those two, they're in. So if that happens, you really only have one spot. And it becomes, do you move Alabama up from 8 to the top 4? That would be a monumental jump. Nobody's ever made a leap that high in one game. And again, as much credit as I wanted to give Alabama and talking about how they really dominated this game, it was a 3-point win. It's not, had Alabama won this game by 20, you go, oh, absolutely, you move them up. They just crushed the number 1 team. But the box score reads as a close loss, as a close win. And for Georgia, it reads as a close loss. Georgia was 12-0, went 8-0 in the conference, and now they take their first loss. So the committee's really got a conundrum on their hands here. I mean, the first question is, how far do you drop Georgia? Does Georgia get to stay in at all? I mean, could they feasibly go from 1 to 4? Yes. But Bama, do you move them up from 8? I mean, do you put them, at 3? A lot of people are making the argument. The SEC champ should be in, no matter what. And again, their one blemish on the season was head-to-head to Texas, who just capped off their season and was outstanding. So I don't know, man. This is really going to be – the committee is going to have – a tough decision on their hands when they go to that room and make that decision tomorrow. And somebody's going to get left outside, on the outside looking in and disappointed. Now, look, there is a scenario here where they could make a case that Texas was very impressive in the Big 12 title game and move them up to 4. Again, Washington's already in. If Michigan and Florida State both hold serve and win tonight, they could keep the SEC out altogether. I don't think they'll do that, but there is a scenario there where Georgia goes from 1 to, say, 5, or maybe they drop them to 6, and then Bama goes from 8 to 5. I don't know. I'm just talking out scenarios here where the SEC could get left in the dark. Let's get to some of you guys on the comments here on YouTube. Are we looking at a national championship playoff without a representative from the SEC? Danny asked that. Yeah, I mean, that's the scenario I just threw out there. It's not likely. Again, I think they value the SEC so much, and the SEC has earned so much respect that somebody's getting in. And there's also a scenario where both Bama and Georgia get in. Now, they'll need some help. Obviously, Florida State needs to take an L tonight to Louisville. That would be massive. Can Iowa do the impossible against Michigan? Not very likely. There's no, Iowa's not going to find an offense. They're going to need 2 pick sixes and a punt return for a touchdown to pull this one off. But again, it's possible tonight. Something like that could happen. Exo said, yes, I said Bama wouldn't lose another game after Texas. Well, you called it. I mean, it was funny. I mean, it didn't look pretty, right? They go to South Florida, and that was that miserable game in the rain with the lengthy rain delay. Jalen Milroe's benched. I mean, they get out with that ugly win. It felt like Bama was just on the surface, it was like, well, this team's probably going to lose to Ole Miss, probably going to lose to A&M, probably going to lose to LSU. That's what it felt like. And then we woke up and realized, oh, that's right. They have the greatest coach of all time on their sideline still, Nick Saban. Yeah, turns out he's still pretty damn good. Exo said, wonder where the Georgia fans laughing at me are at. Well, yeah, on our Locked On SEC Twitter account, people were digging up the video from last year with David Pollack, now no longer part of the ESPN crew, but he made the statement about, Georgia's program is just well ahead of Alabama now with Nick Saban on the panel. And so people are resurfacing that video now because, of course, Bama, we wrote them off. We buried them. Turns out they were not dead. So congrats to Alabama. A few more here. Nick says Mike Bobo just got stiff with his play calling. Yeah, man, the play calling was dry. It felt like they were relying on the run a little bit too much. Like they were afraid. Carson Beck got under pressure a little bit early. And then on top of it, Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers are both playing out there with on one limb. Dominic Lovett was an absolute stud at Missouri last year. Rara Thomas was awesome at Mississippi State. They both transfer in, and I'm thinking, oh, these guys are going to eat this year. Dominic Lovett finished with 500 yards and 3 touchdowns this year. He has 2 catches today for 23 yards. I don't know what the issue is. For as much credit as we gave Carson Beck all year long, and he really did have an outstanding year. But today, man, no touchdowns for him. I mean, he had the rushing touchdown, but no passing touchdowns. 21 for 29, 243 yards. You just look at that stat, it feels hollow, right? But yeah, like they even brought up on the broadcast at one point, like Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. Like Ladd McConkey, every time he made a catch, he's like limping and he's got to leave the game. It's like, is this really the best option? Like, I know these guys are great, but like, play the third or fourth string wide receiver who's healthy. Like, shouldn't you're Georgia? You got 5 stars everywhere. Like that was mind boggling to me. But yeah, early on, like Carson Beck gets under pressure and was like, oh, we got to run. And then Bama's like, well, that's predictable. We'll just keep our linebackers will keep their eyes in the backfield. We'll just load up and, oh, Kendall Milton pitch right. Yep, we're eating that one up. I mean, it's just it. I agree with you, Nick. Bobo really did get stiff with his play calling. Kevin says if they leave the SEC out, the SEC minus Vandy plus maybe 8 more teams should just withdraw from small ball from their own division. It's kind of interesting. Greg Sankey was asked about withdrawing from the NCAA on an interview. He was doing all these interviews in Atlanta for the SEC championship game. And he was asked about withdrawing from the NCAA. And he basically said, well, we got a new boss, a new head of the NCAA. We're going to give him a chance to prove himself, basically. It's kind of what he said. And it's on the table. I mean, there was a real possibility that, the SEC and some of the other big power conferences can withdraw from the NCAA and kind of do their own thing. So everything is kind of on the table with that moving forward. Not anytime soon, like not next year or the year after, but like certainly a possibility. A few more from our comments here. Bishop Frank says SEC, we OU are looking forward to. Yeah, shout out to Texas, by the way, winning the Big 12 today. I don't know if you guys saw it. They were, their fans starting the SEC chant when the Big 12 commissioner got up there, Brett Yormark, because remember, he was the idiot who got up there and, he was at the Texas Tech Booster Club meeting or whatever and said, yeah, I'm going to be in Austin this year for that game. And hey, we want you guys to beat those guys again. And lo and behold, that game, Texas absolutely destroyed Texas Tech a week ago. But, Yormark was like, I get it. Look, Texas and Oklahoma are leaving the conference. It was this awkward, weird thing where it was like your ex-wife's still living in your house and you're getting a divorce or whatever. It was like, they're 1 foot out the door, but you still have to treat them like a member and all this. Well, I mean, they straight up acted like jerks about it. Like Yormark was like, so the Texas fans booed him, and then they started chanting SEC, SEC, and that was pretty cool to see because, look, Texas and Oklahoma, as much as we've made fun of them, they're now ours. They're coming to the SEC, and, hey, we'll be rooting for – if Texas gets in, hopefully it doesn't leave an SEC team out. Look, sure, Texas would be – we'll see what they can do if they can win a championship. Let's see who else here. Exo said Bama belongs in. They have the strength of schedule, too. If the committee leaves them out, it just shows they don't want the SEC to win. I don't know, man. Again, I go back to the rankings. Like to me, it's a huge jump to go from, and I'll bring up the rankings here again for you guys to look at them. It's just a huge jump to go from 8 to the top 4, right? Oregon was 5. They lose. So by default, 6, 7, 8 all move up. Ohio State was 6. They didn't play a game this weekend. They didn't win they didn't win their part of the Big Ten. So they're not playing this weekend. So by default, Texas and Bama both jumped them, right? So Oregon slides down. Ohio State takes a back seat. So both Texas and Bama are moving up. But do they only move up to 5 and 6? Because again, Washington won. They're 3. They're not going anywhere. Michigan and Florida State, we're going to find out tonight, 2 and 4, what they do. And then Georgia at 1. How far do you slide them down? And is it fair to Georgia, as good as they've played all year and been the number 1 team, is it right to bump them to 5 and knock them completely out of this? And then again, Texas at 7 and Bama at 8. How far can you move them up? It's just crazy. Let's let's see. Nick chimes in again. He says, I'm not saying they're making it. No previous number one has lost and dropped out of the college football playoff. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was remembered back to 2003, and that was the day and age of the BCS when we only had two teams. But Bama, it was Nick Saban at LSU. They won the SEC. They beat Georgia again for the second time that year, and they got in. And Oklahoma was number one. They lost the Big 12 title game to Kansas State, and they still kept them at number one. It's one of those weird cases because it was their first loss, and LSU had one loss already, and USC had a loss. But it was just one of those weird cases where the team was number one, and they thought so highly of them that they didn't even move them. Oklahoma still stayed number one. Now, Georgia's not going to stay number one here, but could they be four? Let's see what a few other you guys are thinking. Mikey says, Alabama can't jump Texas. They beat them head-to-head, both 12-1. I mean, this is where it really gets sticky. I get it. Yes, Texas beat them. But you can also make the argument that was a long time ago. I heard people saying that this week. Bama's a different team now. It's a different Alabama team now. They, this is a different Alabama team than the team that lost to Texas in week 2. Committee can come out and say that. And oh, by the way, they could say Alabama maybe had some more convincing wins along the way than Texas did. No offense against Texas. They just beat the number 18 team. Alabama just beat the number 1 team. Exo says, let Texas in and see what Bama will do with them in a rematch. I mean, look, we're locked on SEC. I will not have a problem if both Bama and Georgia make it. Philip says roll tide roll. Yeah, like put them both in, sure. But there are other worthy teams here, right? We know Washington's in it. If Michigan wins, they kept off an undefeated season. Michigan is in. Florida State's the one that gets sticky because they're without their starting quarterback. And as much as it sucks to ding a team for that, you absolutely can. The committee can do whatever they want from that standpoint. Walter says, Georgia was hyped. They ribbed Bama about not being good. Look how Bama responded. Georgia was never what they thought they were. I mean, I disagree. Georgia's still a damn good team, but on any given Sunday or any given game day, right? Like, Bama came out today and played like the more desperate team, played like the more hungry team. And Georgia didn't. It was the first time. This was literally the first time all year Georgia looked shell-shocked. Georgia looked like they didn't know what they wanted to do on offense, and the defense just looked so out of sync. Finally got it together there in the second half for a bit, but it felt like they kept getting stops and giving the ball back to the offense, and Georgia's offense couldn't do anything. And it was like that starts to get demoralizing because the defense, you're like, eventually we're going to break down. Eventually Bama's going to score again because, like, you guys need to answer. You got to get the momentum back on our side. They left Bama at 8 for a reason. Ohio didn't belong at 6 after their loss. I don't know. Ohio State's looked good too. I mean, there's a reason why they kept them there. But I think them being at 6 meant, like, there's no path for Ohio State to make it, right? With all these other teams playing games this weekend, Ohio State's they're not even in the conversation. John says, yeah, Bama won the SEC. They definitely should be in. I mean, by like in any normal year, yes, that's absolutely the case. But right now, it's a tough one. Walter said Georgia couldn't even win their conference. Cheeto Bowls for the no. Georgia's still, if they're not in the playoff, they're going to a near 6 bowl. Georgia, let's see. Robert says Georgia should have won, but since they didn't, bye. I don't know what that means. Georgia should have won. Well, yeah. I mean, you asked me earlier this morning. I picked Georgia to win this game. I thought that they were the better team, and then, oh yeah, that's right. Kirby lets Nick get in his head, and not aggressive. I don't know. It was an awful game for Georgia today. John says should be out. They had a cupcake schedule all year. I don't know who Dove is. D-O-V-E. Probably misspelling. Michael says Alabama should be in. They beat a number 1 team. We're ranked number 8. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Bama was ranked 8. How do you move them up? How do you move them up all the way to 4? Zoom, the least controversial thing is to value head-to-head matchups. Most of these types of difficult situation. Yeah. The Alabama-Texas head-to-head thing is going to get really, really tricky here. Like, if they were asking my opinion right now, and we got the championship game still being played right now, but let's just by default say that Michigan wins, and let's say Louisville pulls off the upset of Florida State. My top four would be, I'd probably put Michigan one. I think Washington could make a case for being number one. I mean, Oregon really stunk up the joint on Friday. I mean, Bo Nix literally took himself out of the Heisman race of how bad he played. Michael Penix played great. You can make a case for Washington to be number one, but this is what they probably do. Michigan 1, Washington 2. I think I would go Bama 3. And then it's a debate. And then it would be a debate. Again, this is if Florida State loses. Then the debate would be Texas 4 or Georgia 4. And again, you're going to get the Texas fans going, why is Bama 3? And, we're trying to fight for the 4th spot. I get it. Robin says, roll Tide roll. So proud of Crimson Tide. Oh, shout out to Big Dog with a $2 donation. Florida State 3rd string quarterback is playing in their game. Oh, yeah, I've got the game on. I'm not even paying attention to it. They're showing Brian Brom on the screen right now. Well, that's cool then. If Florida State's already on their 3rd string. Come on, Plummer. By the way, it's really weird. There's a Plummer quarterback, and he's not of relation to Jake Plummer. But, all right, Louisville with a deep shot and incomplete. All right, we'll keep focused on you guys and the chat here. SL, Texas beat Bama the end. I agree, man. That's a tough one. It's a tough one. Because you got to think big picture, right? Like Bama has some better wins along the way, including just beating the number 1 team. Texas beat the number 18 team pretty convincingly. A few more here for you guys before we get out of here. Jesse, why Bama plays power teams out of conference, Ohio State out of playoffs, Bama and Georgia are in. Yeah, again, I'm not going to be angry if they both in. If both Bama and Georgia get in. Hillbilly says if Louisville beats FSU, 1 Michigan, 2 Washington, 3 Texas, 4 Bama. I guess probably not crazy that they would. The reasoning behind that one would be Texas beat Bama head-to-head, so we're going to move Texas up to 3. But just think of that jump. You're moving the number 7 and number 18 team, the number 7, number 8 teams in their last playoff rankings, the ones they just did days ago. You're going to move 7 and 8 all the way up to 3 and 4. Again, it just feels like that's a huge jump there. Jesse says Bama 2, Georgia 3, FSU 4 if they win. Okay, but in that case, you're leaving out one of Washington or Michigan. Like Michigan, Bama's not going to get up to 2. If Bama gets in, I think they're 3 or 4. I can't see them moving them from 8 all the way up to 1 or 2. Bad Big Dog, roll Tide roll. I believe Louisville will beat Florida State. We're just hoping, man. That would, the committee's hoping for that too. It'll help them solve a lot of things tonight. K-State beat TCU in the Big 12 championship, and TCU still makes it in as a 3 seed. Yeah, they didn't give TCU very much love last year for that run they had. And XO, it's impressive how far Louisville has come. Their quarterback really ain't good. And the boss said Florida will be out, Michigan, Washington, Texas, Bama. Again, does Georgia have a case? Like, Georgia's been number 1 these last couple weeks. They lost by 3 points to Bama. Do you take Georgia out? Like, and this is where we go back to the argument of what Bill Hancock said, the commissioner of the or the head of the college football playoff or whatever. He said that they're tasked with getting the 4 best teams in. And he said, like, we never talk about most deserving and all this kind of stuff. Well, like, in my opinion, most deserving means resume. Most deserving means you've had big wins, right? Like, I am most deserving because I have X amount of top 25 wins or whatever. Best is so subjective. I've been saying this all week. If I asked everybody, what's the best pizza you've ever had? You're all going to have different answers. Best is the most subjective thing in the world. What's the best whatever? Well, I think this. Well, he thinks that. So best is just like, it's so stupid. I would make the case Georgia just lost by 3 on a neutral field to Alabama. Georgia, by definition, is still one of the 4 best teams in the country. But unfortunately, we only have 4 spots to put teams in here. So, look, we'll see how it plays out. Thank you guys so much for jumping in here with us, and thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen, and hopefully you guys will, if this is your first time checking us out today, hopefully you subscribe to our YouTube page. Check us out. We're going to have more live reaction tomorrow. We're going to do a show tomorrow reacting to the playoff rankings, and then we'll have a show on Monday reacting to everything, and I'm sure we'll have more coaching, hiring, firings like OCs and DCs, more kids in the transfer portal. Keep in mind the portal officially opens up. So some of these reports about kids maybe entering the portal, we'll have guys actually entering the portal and all that. So we'll have all that for you right here on Locked On SEC. And shout out to our everydayers who keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. I'm Chris Gordy. Again, go Louisville, beat the hell out of Florida State. And hey, go Iowa. If you can pull off an upset of Michigan, that'd be great too. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.